If you're not planning on disappearing, don't go to New England. But if you are planning on disappearing, that's the perfect place. Because in those quiet, frozen towns between Massachusetts and New Hampshire, people vanish, and somehow no one ever finds them again. This is the story of one of them. A young woman named Maura Murray, bright, ambitious, and by all accounts, normal. Until the day she wasn't. It all started with a phone call. One quiet night, the Amherst Police Department got a report from a young woman who said her Fleet Bank credit card had been stolen. Someone had been using it since October 20th, running up small charges, mostly pizza deliveries. Nothing major, about $792 in total. But the pattern was strange. Several different pizza joints around town, Pinocchio's, Domino's, Papagino's, all delivering to the same address on the UMass Amherst campus. Kennedy Hall. Officer Carlos Rivera was assigned the case. He drove from shop to shop, collecting receipts, checking bank records, and soon a strange profile began to form. Whoever stole this card really loved chicken Caesar salads, fajita wraps, garlic bread, and mozzarella sticks, the kind of stuff college students live on. So Rivera guessed the thief might be a student, but to prove it, he'd need to catch them in the act. He gave each pizza shop a simple order. If someone tries to pay with that Fleet Bank card again, call us. Hours later, the same night the report was filed, someone did. A driver from Pinocchio's headed to Kennedy Hall with an empty pizza box and a receipt ready for signature. Two patrol officers, Pinkham and Rieran, were waiting nearby, watching. When the driver arrived, a young woman stepped outside to meet him. She signed the slip, calm and polite. That's when the officers appeared from behind the corner, lights flashing. And there she was, the so-called thief, a 22-year-old student from Hanson, Massachusetts. She didn't fight, didn't deny, didn't even look scared. She gave them her name, cooperated fully, and led them up to her dorm room. Her name was Maura Murray. Inside her room, she handed over a Fleet Visa card, but it wasn't the same number as the one used in the fraud. Something wasn't right. Officer Pinkham asked where she got the stolen card number. Maura said she'd copied it down from a receipt she found on the ground outside Pinocchio's. Pinkham checked the receipts himself. None of them showed the full 16-digit number, just the last 4. He pressed her again. Maura changed her story. Maybe it wasn't from Pinocchio's, maybe from Domino's. When asked how she memorized an entire 16-digit card number, she just looked down at the floor, silent. Then, after a pause, she walked to her desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small piece of paper. Written neatly on it, the full card number, a phone number, and a dorm room down the hall. The officers followed up. They knocked on that room. Another young woman answered. She said her friend had recently had fraudulent charges on her card, and she remembered throwing out a pizza receipt with the number printed on it. The garbage chute was right between her room and Maura's. Mystery solved. Maura admitted she had used the number 6 times. She offered to pay back the money. She apologized. She didn't say why. The officers decided not to arrest her that night. 6 days later, she was called back to the station for questioning. Officer Rivera sat across from her, showing her the evidence, receipts, numbers, signatures. Maura confirmed she'd used the card, but denied ordering from one of the restaurants. She was polite, calm, almost too calm. Rivera thanked her for her honesty and told her she'd be charged with improper use of a credit card. He even noted in his report that she had been cooperative and remorseful. Maura apologized again and offered to repay everything. Then she stood up, walked out of the police station, and that was that. Just a college girl who made a stupid mistake. But Officer Rivera couldn't shake the feeling that something about her was off. He described her as quiet, distant, like she was somewhere else already. And he was right, because in just a few months, Maura Murray would vanish completely. On a cold February night in 2004, she'd drive her old Saturn into a snowbank on a back road in rural New Hampshire and disappear into the dark. No footprints, no cell signal, no trace. And for 21 years since that night, no one, not the police, not her family, not the thousands of internet detectives obsessed with her case, has been able to answer one question. What really happened to Maura Murray? When people talk about Maura Murray, they always start with how perfect she seemed. She was the kind of girl small towns brag about, smart, athletic, ambitious, a track star, honor roll student, West Point cadet, nursing major at UMass Amherst. She came from a good family, her father Fred, a hardworking man who adored her mother Lori, and her siblings who called her our golden one. But perfection is a mask, and behind Maura's smile, there were cracks no one noticed until it was too late. After the credit card incident, life went back to normal. At least that's what everyone thought. Maura continued her nursing studies, worked part-time at a campus security desk, and stayed in touch with her boyfriend, Bill Rausch, an Army officer stationed in Oklahoma. They were young, in love, or trying to be. They sent emails every day, called every night. But friends say those calls sometimes ended in silence or tears. Distance, jealousy, maybe secrets, no one really knew. Still, Maura kept moving forward. She was always busy, always controlled, until one night she broke. It was February 5th, 2004, a Thursday. Maura was working the late shift at her campus job, manning the security desk. At 10:30 p.m., her supervisor came by to check on her and found her crying. Not just teary, sobbing uncontrollably. When he asked what was wrong, she only said one thing: "My sister." Then she went silent. She wouldn't explain, wouldn't talk. Her supervisor had to walk her back to her dorm because she couldn't stop shaking. The next day, she said nothing about it, and no one ever figured out what triggered that breakdown. Some believe she'd just spoken with her sister Kathleen, who was struggling with alcohol and rehab. Others think it was something darker, a call from her boyfriend. Whatever it was, something inside Maura cracked that night. Over the next few days, she seemed distracted, like her mind was somewhere far away. On Saturday, February 7th, her father Fred drove up to visit her in Amherst. They went shopping for a new car for Maura, had dinner, talked about plans. By all accounts, it was a nice weekend. That night, Maura borrowed her dad's brand new Toyota to go to a party with friends. But around 3:30 a.m., she crashed it into a guardrail near campus. The damage was minor, but the police showed up. Fred wasn't angry. He told her it was okay, they'd handle the insurance. He even joked about it the next morning. But Maura wasn't laughing. She felt embarrassed, maybe even scared. It was her second incident in just a few months. That Sunday, February 8th, she called her boyfriend Bill several times. They talked briefly, then emailed each other. Nothing dramatic, nothing strange. Just normal, at least on the surface. But by Monday, February 9th, everything changed. That morning, Maura emailed her professors saying she had to take a week off because of a death in the family. That was a lie. No one in her family had died. She then went to an ATM and withdrew $280 in cash, almost all the money she had. Next, she stopped by a local liquor store and bought Kahlua, Bailey's, vodka, and boxed wine. At some point, she printed out MapQuest directions to Burlington, Vermont, about 2 hours north. Then she packed her car, toiletries, textbooks, clothes, and snacks. No one knows why. She didn't tell her friends, her boyfriend, or her family. And sometime that afternoon, she got into her 1996 Saturn and started driving north, alone. For hours, she was just another car on the road, a small silver sedan cutting through the snowy New England woods. No one who passed her had any idea that they were looking at a mystery in motion. Her cell phone records show she called a number in Stowe, Vermont, which belonged to a cabin rental office. She didn't book anything, she just asked a few questions, then hung up. At 4:37 p.m., she checked her voicemail one last time. Then, silence. By nightfall, she was on a winding stretch of Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire, over 100 miles from Amherst. It was dark, cold, the roads were slick with ice. At 7:27 p.m., a neighbor heard a loud thud, a car crash. When they looked outside, they saw a Saturn lodged into a snowbank, its lights still on, and a young woman standing beside it. The neighbor called the police. When the first officer arrived a few minutes later, the car was still there, the airbags deployed, the windshield cracked, the driver's door open. Inside, a box of wine, some clothes, a few maps. No sign of Maura. There were no footprints in the snow leading away from the car. No tire marks from another vehicle. Just silence. As if the girl had evaporated into the winter air. It had been only 7 minutes between the crash and the officer's arrival. 7 minutes in which Maura Murray, a straight-A student, an athlete, a daughter, a friend, vanished completely. And that's when the story of Maura's disappearance truly began. If you've ever driven through rural New Hampshire in February, you know what it feels like. That heavy silence in the woods, the kind that presses down on you like snow. No city lights, no noise, just black trees and the endless hum of the cold. That's where Maura Murray's Saturn came to rest on the night of February 9th, 2004, Route 112 near the tiny town of Haverhill. At 7:27 p.m., a local woman named Faith Westman was at home when she heard a sharp thud outside. She looked out her window and saw a small car lodged into a snowbank. The headlights were still on, and she thought she saw someone, maybe a man, sitting inside, smoking a cigarette. She called 911. Within minutes, another neighbor, Butch Atwood, a school bus driver, stopped at the scene. He saw the car, and beside it, a young woman with dark hair. She was shivering but didn't seem hurt. Butch leaned out his window and said, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need me to call the police?" The girl shook her head quickly. No, I already called she said. That was strange. There was no cell signal in that area. Atwood knew that. Everybody in town knew that. He offered to let her wait inside his house. It was freezing out, below 20 degrees, but she refused again. So, uneasy, Butch drove home, parked his bus, and called the police anyway. By the time he did, Maura was gone. At 7:46 p.m., Sergeant Cecil Smith arrived at the crash site. He saw the Saturn, headlights still on, doors locked, no one inside. He looked around, shined his flashlight through the trees, called out, nothing. Inside the car, he found a few wine bottles, one of them partly empty. There was a box of Franzia wine, a Coke bottle with a red liquid that smelled like alcohol, and MapQuest directions to Burlington and Stowe, Vermont, a few clothes. A book titled Not Without Peril, and oddly, a rag stuffed inside the tailpipe, maybe an attempt to stop exhaust smoke, or something else entirely. There was no blood, no footprints leading into the woods, just a car, and absence. By 8 p.m., local fire and EMS arrived. There was no sign of an injured driver, so they left. Smith called for a tow truck and headed down the road to speak with Butch Atwood. Atwood told him exactly what had happened. The girl seemed cold, shaken, but sober. She said she'd called for help. Smith asked him to drive around and check nearby roads. Butch did, looping around for 15 minutes. He found nothing. By 9 p.m., the Saturn was towed to an impound lot. The police closed the scene. And just like that, the first night of the disappearance ended, with no search party, no urgency, and no sign of Maura. The next morning, her father Fred got the call. Your daughter's car was found abandoned. He immediately drove to New Hampshire, terrified. When he arrived, the car was already locked away at Lavoie's Auto Care, and the police had little to say. They didn't think she'd been kidnapped. They didn't even think she was missing. In their report, they listed Maura as possibly suicidal. They suggested she'd run away. Fred was furious. "That's not my daughter," he told them. "You don't just walk away from your car in the freezing cold at night." But the police didn't launch a proper search until 24 hours later. By then, the snow had fallen again, covering whatever tracks she might have left behind. When the search finally began, it was already February 11th. Dozens of officers, firefighters, and volunteers spread out across the woods and hillsides. A helicopter flew overhead. A K-9 unit picked up Maura's scent, but it stopped suddenly, 100 yards down the road, right in the middle of Route 112. That detail chilled investigators. It meant one of two things. She either got into a car with someone, or she simply vanished. No one had seen her walking along the road. No one had reported picking up a hitchhiker. No footprints, no dropped phone, no purse, just nothing. The search lasted all day. As night fell, temperatures dropped again, down into the teens. Fred Murray stood in the snow scanning the tree line, refusing to go home. Reporters began arriving from Boston. The story hit the local news that night. A 21-year-old nursing student has gone missing after a car crash. The next morning, the press showed her photo. Dark brown hair, soft eyes, confident smile. The kind of face you'd never expect to see under the word missing. Fred told reporters, "I don't know what happened to my daughter, but she didn't just disappear. Somebody knows something." He believed she'd been taken. Police, meanwhile, weren't so sure. They theorized she might have run away, depressed, stressed, maybe escaping her life. Some even whispered that she'd staged her own disappearance. But Fred and Maura's friends knew better. She hadn't packed like someone planning to vanish forever. She'd brought her textbooks, her jewelry, her makeup, and birth control, the things you bring when you plan to come back. By that Friday, the case was already dividing everyone who touched it. To some, Maura was a runaway, to others, a victim. And to the rest, she'd become something even stranger, the ghost at the center of a mystery that refused to die. Because somewhere in those 7 minutes between a crash and a cruiser's arrival, a young woman simply ceased to exist. And almost 20 years later, nobody can explain how. By the time the official investigation began, Maura Murray had already been gone for 3 days. 3 days in the New Hampshire winter. And in cases like that, time isn't measured in hours. It's measured in degrees. Her father, Fred Murray, was furious. When he first arrived in Haverhill, police treated him like a nuisance, not a grieving father. They said, "We don't have evidence of foul play." Fred shot back, "You don't have evidence of anything." He wanted a full-scale search. Dogs, helicopters, the works. But police insisted she was probably alive somewhere and didn't want to be found. To them, this was a missing adult, not a crime scene. That mistake would define the case forever. The New Hampshire State Police eventually joined the search. On February 11th, they sent in dogs and a helicopter equipped with infrared sensors. But there was no trace of Maura, not even a heat signature, nothing in the woods, no sign of her crossing the river. It was as if she had stepped off the face of the earth. Reporters swarmed the tiny town. The story went from local to national. Pretty soon, every network in New England was running the headline, "College student vanishes after crash, no leads." People started coming forward with stories, most of them strange. One woman said she saw a young person running down Route 112 that night. Another claimed she saw a suspicious black pickup truck idling near the crash site. But none of it could be verified. There were no reliable witnesses, no security cameras, no phone pings. Her cell phone had never been used again. Her credit cards, silent. Whatever happened to Maura, it happened fast. In the following days, Fred and Maura's siblings began their own search. They went door to door, handed out flyers, drove every road within 10 miles. They questioned locals, dug through snowbanks, checked abandoned cabins. Fred was relentless. He'd stand at the crash site in sub-zero wind, staring into the woods, calling her name. "Maura, honey, it's Dad! Come home!" But the only sound was the wind moving through the trees. When the family begged police to bring in more help, the department resisted. They didn't want volunteers interfering with their ongoing investigation. But there wasn't really an investigation, not in the way people expected. No one had been interrogated. No one had been ruled out. No evidence had been processed for prints or DNA. The car itself, the most important piece of the puzzle, had already been released to the insurance company before forensics ever looked at it. The more people looked into it, the stranger it got. That rag stuffed into the tailpipe, police never explained it. Fred said he'd told Maura to use a rag to stop exhaust leaking during cold starts, but other mechanics said that made no sense. The Coke bottle found inside the car smelled like alcohol, but the bottle was never tested. Every detail seemed to contradict the next. Was she drunk? Running away? Being followed? The deeper the family looked, the less the police seemed to know. Then came the rumors. Someone claimed Maura had been seen hitchhiking near the crash site. Someone else said she was picked up by a man in a red truck. A psychic told the family to search a nearby pond. Another said she was buried in a cellar near an old farmhouse. Each lead turned into another dead end. The media, hungry for mystery, started painting Maura as a troubled girl. They dug up her credit card arrest, her car accident, her lies to professors. To the public, she wasn't a victim anymore. She was a puzzle. Online forums exploded with speculation. Some said she'd faked her death to start a new life in Canada. Others believed she'd been abducted by a serial killer who preyed on women along the I-91 corridor. The truth was simpler and crueler. No one really knew anything. By spring, the case was cold. The snow melted, the woods thawed, and all that was left was an empty stretch of road and a grieving family. Fred refused to stop searching. He kept driving back to Haverhill every weekend, taping flyers to trees and talking to anyone who'd listen. He told reporters, "My daughter didn't just vanish. Someone took her. I just need to know who." But as the months passed, even the media moved on. other stories filled the headlines. The Murray case became one of those names you'd hear once in a while. A mystery, a ghost, an unanswered question. Still, the people who were there that night, the neighbors, the cops, the family, never forgot the sound of that crash or how quickly it turned to silence. And then, just when the world was starting to forget, another woman vanished, just 90 miles away. Same age, same kind of car, same eerie emptiness. Her name was Brianna Maitland, and her story sounded far too familiar. It was just over a month after Maura Murray vanished, when another young woman in northern New England seemed to follow her into the fog. March 19, 2004. 90 miles northwest of Haverhill, in the quiet Vermont town of Montgomery, a 19-year-old waitress named Brianna Maitland finished her shift at the Black Lantern Inn. She told coworkers she was tired and heading home. She never made it. The next morning, her green 1985 Oldsmobile was found backed into the side of an old barn. Driver's door open, lights still on, just like Maura's car. Her purse and paychecks were still inside. No blood, no footprints, no Brianna. 2 young women, 2 cars left in the snow, 2 disappearances with no answers. That's when people started whispering, what if they're connected? At first, investigators said no, different states, different lives, but the details were impossible to ignore. Both women were young, brunette, and living in small New England college towns. Both vanished near remote rural roads. Both seemed to be running from something, but no one knew what. And in both cases, police botched the early investigation so badly, it left a wound that still hasn't healed. Back in Haverhill, Fred Murray refused to give up. He spent his weekends scouring the back roads of northern New Hampshire, posting missing flyers, knocking on doors, calling radio stations, begging for tips. Sometimes, people whispered things they shouldn't have. One local man told Fred, "You're not going to find her in one piece." Another said, "Check the A-frame house up on the mountain." That house would later become the focus of one of the most disturbing theories in the case. But at the time, police didn't follow up. Fred said it best in an interview years later. Every day they wasted in those first 48 hours made the truth harder to find. And maybe impossible. Over time, 3 theories took shape. None of them proved anything. But each one had believers, and each one made sense in its own twisted way. Theory 1, the accident. Some think Maura simply wandered off and froze to death. After the crash, maybe she panicked, worried about another DUI, another police record, another failure. Maybe she ran into the woods to hide from the cops and never came back out. New Hampshire winters are unforgiving. A single night at those temperatures could kill you in an hour. If that's what happened, her body would have been buried under feet of snow, maybe dragged away by animals before the thaw. But here's the problem. Police and search teams scoured every inch of that area. Helicopters, dogs, volunteers, nothing. Not a shoe, not a bone, not a single trace. If she died out there, nature buried her too well. Theory 2, the runaway. The second theory is darker and stranger. Some believe Maura planned her own disappearance, that she lied about the death in the family because she needed an excuse to leave, that she withdrew her cash, bought alcohol, and drove north to start over. Her computer searches that day showed she'd looked up lodges in Vermont and New Hampshire, and she'd printed directions to Burlington, a college town she knew. People who believe this theory say she staged the crash to throw off the trail, then got into another car, maybe with someone she'd arranged to meet. But if that's true, where is she now? In 20 years, she's never used her social security number, her credit cards, or any bank account. No passport, no digital trace, nothing. It's as if Maura Murray not only disappeared, she erased herself. Theory 3, the abduction. And then there's the theory that keeps people awake at night, that she was taken. Maybe she accepted a ride from the wrong person. Maybe the crash wasn't an accident. Maybe someone was following her. Some witnesses claimed they saw a dark SUV idling nearby that night. Others remembered seeing a man smoking near her car, even though Maura didn't smoke. There were even whispers of a local predator, a man with a history of violence, living just a few miles from the crash. Police interviewed him, but never charged him. The same man would later be linked unofficially to Brianna Maitland's disappearance. 2 missing women, 2 similar scenes, and one small region where evil could move unseen. Years later, both cases remain open, officially unsolved. But to the families, that word feels hollow. Fred Murray still visits New Hampshire every February. He leaves flowers by the guardrail where her Saturn hit the snowbank. He looks out at the dark woods and whispers, "I'm still here, kiddo. I'll never stop." He's 80 now. He's still searching. Every theory has holes. Every timeline has contradictions. But one truth remains. In one of the safest corners of America, 2 young women vanished without a trace. And somewhere out there, maybe under the snow, maybe walking free, lies the answer to both their stories. By 2005, Maura Murray's name had become more than a missing persons report. It was a myth, a ghost story for the internet age, the kind of story people tell on forums at 2 a.m., staring into the blue glow of their computer screens. What started as a quiet New England disappearance had turned into something much bigger, a digital obsession. In the early days, there was no Netflix, no Reddit, just message boards and old web forums, web sleuths, city data, topics. That's where the story of Maura Murray truly began to spread. People started digging. They read police reports, downloaded maps, even drove to New Hampshire to walk Route 112 themselves. Every scrap of evidence, every rumor, every timestamp was picked apart and reassembled into theories that sometimes bordered on madness. One user would post, "Look at the MapQuest directions. She was heading to Stowe, not Burlington." Another replied, "No, she was following someone. Maybe a UMass connection." Then came the videos. Amateur detectives with shaky cameras driving the same route, filming the same crash site, narrating their theories like they were uncovering a government conspiracy. Maura's case became America's first viral true crime mystery, before the word viral even meant anything. Fred Murray hated it at first. He called the internet chatter a circus. People online were accusing his daughter of everything: drug use, mental breakdown, even running away to Canada. But over time, the chaos turned into pressure. Pressure on the police, on the state, on anyone still holding secrets. And somewhere inside that noise, a few people were genuinely trying to help. Among them was James Renner, a journalist who made it his mission to find out what really happened to Maura. He chased leads across the Northeast, interviewed ex-boyfriends, professors, friends, anyone who'd ever spoken to her. He even tracked down police officers who worked the case and refused to talk publicly. His conclusion shocked everyone. Renner believed Maura wasn't dead, that she had vanished on purpose. He theorized she'd fled to Canada or started a new life under a different name. He found reports of a woman who looked just like her, working in a bar across the border. Others swore they saw her in Canada, at a bus station or on a ferry. But every sighting ended the same way. No proof, no confirmation. Renner's book divided the true crime world. Half the people admired his dedication. The other half thought he'd turned tragedy into entertainment. Meanwhile, the Murray family was falling apart under the weight of it all. Fred spent his savings chasing dead leads. Kathleen, Maura's sister, struggled with addiction and survivor's guilt. Friends stopped returning calls. What remained was the silence. The same silence that had swallowed Maura on that February night. Then in 2017, 13 years after she disappeared, new hope flickered. The Oxygen Network announced a 6-part documentary titled The Disappearance of Maura Murray. It reignited national interest. Suddenly, new tips poured in. People started visiting the crash site again, leaving flowers, letters, even miniature crosses. The show revealed footage, interviews, and hints of police records that had been sealed for years. And while it didn't solve the case, it did something important. It made sure people didn't forget her. That same year, forensic teams were called to a remote A-frame house just a few miles from where Maura vanished. A group of private investigators, working for the Murray family, claimed that cadaver dogs hit on human remains inside the basement. For a moment, it felt like the case was about to break wide open. But when state police finally searched the property, they said they found nothing. No bones, no trace, just another dead end. Fred didn't believe it. He told reporters, "They're lying. They didn't dig deep enough. My daughter's there." To this day, that house still stands, empty, its windows dark, its story unfinished. 20 years later, Maura Murray's face still appears on Reddit threads, podcasts, and YouTube thumbnails. Her photo, young, smiling, confident, has become an icon of the unsolved. Every year, true crime creators revisit her case, picking apart the same 24 hours, frame by frame, second by second. They chase shadows, contradictions, and coincidences. They argue about timelines, dogs, and direction maps, because no matter how many times people retell it, the mystery refuses to close. Some stories fade. This one just keeps haunting the internet, a loop that never ends. To this day, the spot where her car crashed still draws visitors. You can drive down Route 112 on a cold night, park near the guardrail, and feel it, the same uneasy quiet. Locals say the air gets heavier there, that sometimes, when the wind cuts through the trees, you can almost hear the echo of footsteps, and a young woman's voice calling out for help that never came. 2 decades have passed since Maura Murray's Saturn slipped off that frozen New Hampshire road, and still, no one knows what really happened that night. But what we do know is this: Maura's case changed everything. Before 2004, missing person stories lived in police files and local headlines. They came and went, a photo in the paper, a few days on the evening news, then silence. Maura's disappearance was different. It arrived at the dawn of a new world, one where the internet could outpace police, where strangers could build timelines, track calls, map search routes, and compare receipts from dorm cafeterias. She became the first true crime mystery of the digital age, not solved by detectives, but kept alive by the crowd. At first, those early sleuths were dismissed as crazy people on message boards. But over time, they started doing what police hadn't. They tracked down old classmates. They requested public records. They dug into weather patterns, phone towers, and cell pings. Some of it was nonsense. Some of it was brilliant. And all of it made Maura's story impossible to bury. Every few years, a new wave of investigators and creators rediscovers her. Reddit threads, podcasts, documentaries, each one reopens the wound, reframes the mystery, and drags her name back into the light. Her case became the blueprint for every unsolved story that came after. If you've ever seen a YouTube documentary titled What Happened To, that format was born from Maura Murray. But with that came something darker. The internet doesn't forget, and it doesn't forgive. People who had known Maura, friends, professors, even her family, became targets of online suspicion. Every hesitation, every inconsistent quote became evidence. A grieving father was accused of hiding something. An ex-boyfriend was called a murderer by strangers who'd never met him. Some of those people still get hate mail 20 years later. The same technology that immortalized Maura's story also blurred the line between justice and obsession. And yet, in the middle of all that noise, the question remains heartbreakingly simple. Where did Maura go? Every few years, police receive new tips. A backpack found in the woods, a woman matching her description seen at a rest stop, a possible burial site behind a farmhouse. Each time the Murrays hold their breath, each time it's nothing. There are no remains, no confirmed sightings, no digital footprints, not even a single verified call after February 9th, 2004. It's as if the world swallowed her whole. Some believe she's still alive, that she started over, changed her name, built a quiet life somewhere she'll never be recognized. Others believe her body lies hidden under years of earth, just yards from the crash site, waiting for someone to finally dig deep enough. And then there are those who say the truth is somewhere in between, that she made a desperate choice, that she walked away from her life, but never got far enough to escape it. Whatever the answer, Maura's case left behind something much bigger than the mystery itself. It left behind a movement, the new kind of detective. The rise of citizen detectives, ordinary people using technology to investigate the extraordinary, can trace its roots straight back to the Murray case. By the late 2010s, podcasts like Missing Maura Murray drew millions of downloads. YouTubers recreated the crash. TikTokers retraced her last phone calls. True crime wasn't just entertainment anymore. It was participation. People didn't just watch the mystery, they lived in it, scrolling through screenshots, police logs, satellite photos. They weren't content with the ending because there wasn't one. And that's why Maura's story endures, because it isn't finished. Because anyone who learns about it becomes a part of it, a new link in the chain of curiosity and grief. Fred Murray once said in an interview, "If I die without knowing what happened, I'll haunt every damn one of them until they tell me." He wasn't joking, he meant it. You could see it in his eyes, that kind of devotion that goes beyond reason. He wasn't searching for hope anymore. He was searching for truth. And in a way, that's what everyone's been doing ever since. The ending that isn't. If you drive down Wild Ammonoosuc Road today, it looks exactly the same. Quiet, gray, a thin ribbon of asphalt cutting through the woods. There's a small wooden cross near the curve where Maura's car hit the snowbank. People leave flowers there, sometimes candles, sometimes notes that say things like, "We still remember you. You deserved better. You made us care." It's strange how a single moment can echo for decades. How one crash, one choice, one cold February night can ripple through thousands of lives, across towns, across states, across time. Some say she's still out there, watching from the edge of the woods. Some say her ghost walks that stretch of road, waving down cars that never stop. Others say she never left, that she became part of the place itself. Maybe that's true, or maybe she's finally at peace somewhere far from the noise and the cameras. But the truth is simpler, sadder, and far more human. A girl made a mistake, a system failed her, and the world hasn't stopped asking why. Epilogue. 20 years later, the case file still sits in a cabinet at the New Hampshire State Police Barracks, marked open, unsolved. New detectives inherit it. They read the reports, they walk the road, and every one of them says the same thing. It feels like she's just out of reach. Maybe one day someone will find a clue, a bone, a bracelet, a truth buried in the snow. Maybe one day her family will finally get the call they've been waiting for. Until then, her story belongs to the rest of us. To everyone who's ever looked into the dark and wondered how a person can just vanish. Because if Maura Murray taught us anything, it's this. Sometimes the most haunting part of a mystery isn't what happened. It's the quiet, terrible question that always follows. How could it happen to someone like her? If you're not planning on going missing, the storyteller's voice fades. Don't go to New England. But if you are, that's the one place no one will ever find you.